Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Now, the date, April 14th, 1912, may not ring a bell to you, but you've certainly heard of the sinking of the Titanic. Now, the Titanic was actually sent to sea just a few days earlier. Actually, it was launched on April 10th, so 2 days earlier from Hampton, England, and it was headed to New York. It was its maiden voyage, and everybody heralded it as unsinkable because it had these advanced watertight compartments, and there were 16 of them. And at that time, it was the largest passenger ship going. I think it was 800 some odd feet. There were first-class passengers and third-class passengers and so on and so forth. And it was deemed to be unsinkable, and so it didn't really heed a lot of the warnings related to icebergs that were in the area. And then we all know that it ultimately hit an iceberg and it sank. And it didn't have enough. It didn't have enough lifeboats on it, and there were a lot of lifeboats that there was only lifeboats for half the people, from what I can tell, and they weren't even full because of just the panic, the sheer panic of the ship going down. I think it took a little over 2 hours for the whole thing to sink. And death toll was like 1,500 people and 700 survived. So a lot of people could have survived and didn't. What I find interesting about it is that there were a lot of theories with respect to how it sank, and what I find interesting is that what modern analysis has found is that really it was small punctures that doomed the ship. There were 6 punctures, or 6 small openings along the side of the ship where I guess it scraped against the iceberg. And again, nobody knows for sure, right? I'm just kind of going on just things that I have found online. And yes, this all does relate back to relationships and networking, just to let you know. But what I've found is that what I have found in looking into this is that there were 6 small openings, and the total estimated area of those openings was about 12 to 15 square feet. So 12 square feet is approximately the half the size of a doorway. And so these were not huge punctures along the base of the ship. And what happened was that the punctures weren't just in one compartment or 2 compartments. They actually breached 5 compartments because the punctures took place over a number of different areas. And none of them were more than a few inches wide. And it popped rivets and allowed water in. And because it was 4 or 5 watertight compartments, it was just too much and it overwhelmed the ship, and so the unsinkable ship sank. But when you stop and you look at 12 to 15 square feet, now let's compare that to the total water displacement. That is the surface area of the ship that was below water. They call it wetted surface area. Now, obviously, if you have a hole in a ship that's above the water, it's not a big deal, but it's the below the water holes that matter. And so again, just digging into this, thanks ChatGPT, the total surface area, wetted surface area, was approximately 100 square feet. So when you stop and you look at it, I've always thought that the hole in the Titanic was this barn-size hole that was just gushing water, and that wasn't the case at all. Again, 12 to 15 feet of 12 to 15 square feet of 100,000 square feet, which means that the total failure rate of the whole compared to the whole HOLE compared to the whole ship WHOLE was 0.0012 or 15%. Very, very small hole compared to the total size of the wetted surface area took down that ship. Now, what does that have to do with networking? Last year, I started to stumbled across an author, a speaker, a podcaster, and her name is Meadow DeVore, and she has courses online, and she's I don't know if I can't find her podcast, but I know she's got a number of books, and what she talks about are things related to self-worth, dealing with narcissism. I stumbled across a number of videos that she has online, and then she has a community where people go in and they talk about these things, dealing with narcissism. And anyhow, so I was going through this, and she has a course that she offers, and so I just figured, okay, I'm going to take the course. It wasn't really expensive, and could kind of take it at my own pace. And I was telling somebody about it, and they're like, "Well, why are you taking this? You don't really have to. You're not really dealing with these sorts of people." And my response was, "Yeah, no, I'm not, but I have in the past." And what I find is that when I deal with people who are narcissistic, when people who try to take your power, when there are people who try to belittle you, what I find is that it hurts me overall. You spend an enormous amount of energy dealing with those people, and you only have so much energy in a day. That's just the way it is, right? There's only so much energy, and if you're wasting time with the people who are sucking the energy out of you, and it might not be a narcissist, it might be somebody who's just overly needy, you know maybe not a narcissist, but somebody who's kind of making you feel bad about yourself. All these little things, and you don't have to have a lot of them in your life, just kind of like the Titanic. You don't have to have a giant hole to take down the big ship. You just have to have a small hole to take down the ship. And that's why I think it's important that we work on these things, that we, it would be wonderful just to have great people in our lives, positive, optimistic people, but that's not always possible for a number of reasons. Part of the reason it's not possible is that you don't know people until they really get into your life. They might, you meet them at an event or you're introduced to them, and they seem, normal like people, and then you get to know them, and all of a sudden you realize, okay, they're not. And that's why probably divorce courts have as many people as they have in them. So the point of this episode, you certainly got a little knowledge about the Titanic, and I had looked this up I had that information for other reasons. Was just looking into the Titanic, but the point of the episode is do the work, right? You have to do the work. You have to realize that you're not going to always have rainbows and sunshine in your life with respect to people. You're going to have stormy, cloudy people, and you have to be guarded against those sorts of people, and you have to think about how you're going to deal with those people. You can't just avoid them. You might have a vendor, you might have an employee, you might have a boss, you might have a neighbor. You might have people who just come into your life and potentially poke holes into an otherwise great existence. And I'm committed to trying to learn all sorts of things. I listen to podcasts. I go on long trips to visit family, long drives, listen to podcasts, listen to books, just trying to get a little better, a little better. It's easy to deal with the nice people. It's easy to deal with the great people, and I have lots of great people in my life. I don't want the one bad person to take down everything, and maybe not take it down, but just not make me as effective with the people I really need to be effective with. So think about it. Think about all the different types of people in your existence, and how some of them are really, really great, and be grateful for those really great people, but then recognize that there are some there that are not great people. They're not bad people necessarily, but it's their demeanor that could potentially derail a lot of other relationships. You don't show up in the world as successful, or as effective as you could be. And you need to be on your game with every relationship, because every what you do is going to impact downstream what other people do. And so you want to be your highest and best self whenever you're dealing with people. And to do that, you've got to minimize the impact of the people out there who might take your self-worth, that might be overly needy, that might be narcissistic. For me, I look at it this way. I have a great life, and I am surrounded by lots of great people. But there will be people who come into my life that maybe aren't so great, and I'll just leave it at that. And if I want to continue to have a great life and to serve the great people in my life, I need to be equipped to guard against the people who are not so great. That's why I think it's important to look into things that might not seem relevant in the moment. Just kind of doing a little work in advance, and dealing with potential narcissistic people, potential needy people, is a worthwhile investment of my time.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.